October 24th, 1944, 11:47 p.m., Formosa Strait. Commander Richard O'Kane swept his binoculars across the dark Pacific horizon, counting targets. 1 Japanese cargo ship, 2, 5, 10, 15. He stopped counting at 20. There were too many. A massive convoy, merchant ships, tankers, troop transports, all steaming south toward the Philippines, where American forces had just landed at Leyte Gulf. Each ship was packed with supplies, ammunition, reinforcements, everything the Japanese needed to fight back against MacArthur's invasion. Perfect targets. Except, O'Kane had a problem. USS Tang had been on patrol for 49 days. She'd crossed half the Pacific, prowled the waters off Japan, China, and Formosa. She'd attacked convoy after convoy, and she'd been devastatingly successful. In 49 days, Tang had sunk 24 Japanese ships, freighters, tankers, troop transports, even a destroyer. Over 100,000 tons of enemy shipping sent to the bottom. It was the most successful submarine patrol in U.S. Navy history. O'Kane had already broken every record. But success had a cost: torpedoes. American fleet submarines like Tang carried 24 torpedoes total, 16 in the main torpedo rooms, 8 reloads. Each torpedo was a Mark 14 or Mark 18, sophisticated, expensive weapons that cost $10,000 each in 1944 dollars. O'Kane had fired 22 of them. He had exactly 2 torpedoes remaining, and in front of him was a convoy of 20-plus Japanese ships. Any other submarine commander would have done the math. 2 torpedoes, pick the 2 best targets, fire from long range, then get the hell out of there. Mission accomplished. Return to Pearl Harbor, celebrate the record-breaking patrol. But Richard O'Kane looked at that convoy and thought, I can do better than 2. Officer of the deck, O'Kane said calmly. Prepare to surface the boat. Lieutenant Lawrence Savadkin turned to stare at him. Sir, did you say surface? You heard me. We're going to surface and engage with the deck gun. Savadkin's face went pale. Sir, we're in the middle of an enemy convoy. There are destroyers out there. If we surface, they'll see us. Only if we give them time to see us. We surface, close to point-blank range, hit them with the 5-inch gun, sink as many as we can before they react, then crash dive before the destroyers get organized. That's... Savadkin struggled for words. That's insane, sir. O'Kane smiled. That's why it'll work. They won't expect it. Japanese doctrine says submarines stay submerged. They attack with torpedoes from distance. They don't surface in the middle of a convoy and start shooting. Because it's suicide. It's only suicide if you do it wrong. O'Kane turned to the helmsman. All ahead full. Take us up. And somebody wake up the gun crew. Tell them to break out the 5-inch ammunition. We're going hunting. The crew of USS Tang had served under O'Kane long enough to know when their captain got that look in his eyes, arguing was pointless. They'd seen him do impossible things before. They'd watched him attack Japanese convoys in broad daylight when doctrine said submarines only attacked at night. They'd seen him chase destroyers that were supposed to be chasing him. They'd watched him fire torpedoes from ranges so close that the crew could hear Japanese sailors shouting on enemy ships before the torpedoes hit. O'Kane didn't follow the submarine warfare manual. He rewrote it with every patrol. But this? Surfacing in the middle of an enemy convoy? This was beyond aggressive. This was reckless. And yet, the crew of USS Tang trusted him, because every time O'Kane did something that seemed suicidal, they survived. Not only survived, they won. So when the order came to surface, The crew moved to their stations without hesitation. The diving officer began blowing ballast tanks. Tang rose from 60-foot depth toward the surface. The gun crew assembled in the control room, pulling on life jackets, checking equipment. The 5-inch deck gun was a 5-inch 25 caliber weapon designed for surface combat against enemy ships and aircraft. Most submarines rarely used it. Torpedoes were the primary weapon. But O'Kane loved the deck gun. It was cheap. Shells cost a few dollars each instead of $10,000 per torpedo. It was versatile. And at close range, it was deadly. Tang broke the surface. Hatches opened. O'Kane climbed to the bridge, binoculars in hand. The Japanese convoy was 2,000 yards away, silhouetted against the moonlight. Ships plodding along at 10 knots, confident they were safe in their own waters. They had no idea an American submarine had just surfaced behind them. "Gun crew on deck," O'Kane ordered. "Load high-explosive shells. Target the nearest tanker." 8 sailors scrambled out of the hatches and ran to the deck gun. They loaded a shell, transversed the gun, aimed. Fire! Before we continue with the most insane night attack in submarine history, you need to understand the man who ordered it. Because Richard O'Kane wasn't just aggressive, he was the most successful submarine commander in American history. And his path to that position was anything but conventional. Richard Hetherington O'Kane was born in 1911 in Dover, New Hampshire. He went to the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis, graduated in 1934. He was a mediocre student, middle of his class, no particular distinction, nothing that suggested he'd become a legend. He served on surface ships for several years, destroyers, cruisers, standard officer career path. Then, in 1938, he volunteered for submarine duty. Submarine service in the 1930s was not prestigious. Subs were considered experimental, dangerous, career-limiting. Most ambitious officers stayed on battleships and cruisers where promotion was faster. But O'Kane was drawn to submarines for exactly the reason others avoided them: independence. On a battleship, you're part of a fleet, following orders from an admiral, part of a formation. On a submarine, you're alone. The captain makes decisions, lives or dies by his own choices. O'Kane wanted that autonomy. He trained at submarine school, qualified on several boats, and by 1942, when America entered World War II, he was executive officer, second in command, on USS Wahoo, under Commander Dudley "Mush" Morton. And that's where O'Kane learned to be aggressive. Mush Morton was a rebel. He ignored submarine doctrine. He attacked on the surface in daylight. He chased destroyers. He took crazy risks. And it worked. Wahoo became one of the most successful submarines of the early war. O'Kane watched and learned. He saw that submarines didn't have to be cautious. They didn't have to follow the book. Aggressive tactics worked. But Morton was reckless in a way that worried O'Kane. Morton took risks without calculating odds. He relied on instinct and luck. O'Kane wanted to be aggressive and smart. Calculated aggression. Controlled chaos. In 1943, O'Kane was given his own command, USS Tang, a brand-new Below-class fleet submarine fresh from the shipyard. She was state-of-the-art. 311 feet long, 2,400 tons submerged, 4 torpedo tubes forward, 4 aft, plus the 5-inch deck gun. She could dive to 400 feet, cruise at 20 knots on the surface, and stay submerged for 48 hours on battery power. And O'Kane pushed her to the limits. Her first patrol took Tang to the waters off Japan. She sank 5 ships. Second patrol, 7 ships sunk. Third patrol, 10 ships. By his 4th patrol, this one in October 1944, O'Kane and Tang had sunk over 30 Japanese vessels. He was the top-scoring submarine commander in the American Navy. He'd developed a reputation: brilliant, aggressive, fearless, and slightly crazy. His tactics were studied by other submarine commanders. Some tried to copy him. Most couldn't, because O'Kane's tactics required nerve that most men didn't have. He would attack in daylight. He would attack in shallow water where submarines couldn't dive deep if things went wrong. He would fire torpedoes from ranges so close that if one malfunctioned and exploded, it would take Tang with it. And he would surface in the middle of enemy convoys and start shooting, which is exactly what he was about to do. To appreciate how audacious O'Kane's decision to surface was, you need to understand what Tang had already accomplished on this patrol. The Fourth War Patrol had started on September 24, 1944. Tang left Pearl Harbor with a full load of 24 torpedoes and orders to hunt in the waters off Formosa and the Chinese coast. For the first 2 weeks, O'Kane prowled the shipping lanes, looking for targets. On October 10th, he found a convoy, 5 Japanese freighters escorted by 2 destroyers. Normal submarine doctrine: stay submerged, fire torpedoes from 1,500 to 2,000 yards, then dive deep and evade. O'Kane's tactic? Surface at night, close to 1,000 yards, fire a full spread of 6 torpedoes, reload, and fire again before the escorts react. Result? 4 freighters sunk, 1 destroyer crippled. Tang dove and escaped while the surviving escort was still trying to figure out what happened. Over the next 2 weeks, O'Kane attacked convoy after convoy. October 11th, 3 tankers sunk. October 23rd, 2 troop transports and a cargo ship sunk. October 24th, early morning, 4 more ships sent to the bottom. By the evening of October 24th, Tang had sunk 24 ships on this single patrol. 24 ships, over 100,000 tons of enemy shipping. It was already the most successful submarine patrol in U.S. Navy history. O'Kane could have called it quits right there, headed back to Pearl Harbor, collected his Medal of Honor, which he would eventually receive, retired as a legend. But that's not how O'Kane thought. He had 2 torpedoes left, and he saw 20 more targets. The Japanese convoy was heading south, carrying reinforcements and supplies to the Philippines, where American forces were fighting to retake the islands. Every ship in that convoy that reached the Philippines meant more American soldiers killed, more resistance, longer war. O'Kane couldn't sink all 20 ships, but he could sink more than 2, with the deck gun. If you're hooked by this story of the most audacious submarine attack in history, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It helps us bring you more incredible untold stories from World War II. Now, let's get back to O'Kane's impossible night attack. USS Tang surfaced at 11:52 p.m., less than 2,000 yards from the Japanese convoy. The night was dark, no moon yet, just starlight. Perfect conditions for a submarine operating on the surface. O'Kane stood on the bridge with his binoculars, picking targets. The nearest ship was a 10,000-ton tanker loaded with fuel, probably heading to Leyte to refuel Japanese aircraft and ships. Behind it, a troop transport, then cargo ships. Targets everywhere. "Gunnery crew ready, sir," the gunnery officer reported. "Target the tanker," O'Kane ordered. "Range 1,800 yards, fire when ready." The 5-inch deck gun roared. The shell arced through the darkness and hit the tanker amidships. A bright flash, then nothing. "Damn," O'Kane muttered. "Armor-piercing round. We need high explosive." The gun crew reloaded with HE shells. Fired again. This time, the shell hit the tanker's superstructure and exploded. Fire erupted. "That's more like it," O'Kane said. "Keep firing. Rapid fire. Pour it into her." The deck gun crew worked like a machine. Load, fire, every 15 seconds another shell. The tanker was burning now, her crew abandoning ship. But O'Kane wasn't watching the tanker anymore. He was looking at the escorts. 2 Japanese destroyers were maneuvering, trying to locate the submarine that was attacking their convoy. But they were looking in the wrong direction. They expected a submarine to be submerged, attacking with torpedoes from long range. They weren't looking for a surfaced submarine 1,800 yards away shooting with a deck gun. "Helm, come right to 270, O'Kane ordered. "Bring us parallel to the convoy. We're going to run down the line and shoot every ship we pass." Tang turned, presenting her narrow profile to the destroyers while moving parallel to the convoy. The deck gun shifted to a new target, a cargo ship loaded with supplies. Fire, fire, fire. Shells slammed into the cargo ship's hull. Explosions, fire. The ship began to list. Tang moved on to the next target. For the next hour, USS Tang raced down the convoy line like a wolf among sheep. She was doing 18 knots on the surface, faster than the slow-moving cargo ships could manage. She'd close to 1,200 yards, fire a dozen shells, set the target on fire, then move to the next ship before the escorts could react. It was chaos. Japanese ships were scattering in all directions. Some were trying to escape, others were turning to ram what they thought might be the submarine's position, but weren't even close. The destroyers were firing star shells, illumination rounds, but they were firing in the wrong areas. Tang stayed in the shadows between the burning ships, using the fires as cover, moving fast, shooting constantly. O'Kane was in his element. This was what he lived for, fast-paced surface combat, making split-second decisions, outmaneuvering the enemy. "Target cargo ship at 1 o'clock, the lookout called. "I see her," O'Kane replied. "Gun crew, traverse right 20 degrees, target that ship, fire at will." The gun roared, hit. Another ship burning. By 1 a.m., Tang had sunk or crippled 5 ships with the deck gun alone. 5 ships, using cheap artillery shells instead of expensive torpedoes. O'Kane's crew was ecstatic. They were making history. No submarine had ever conducted a surface attack like this. But O'Kane knew they were pushing their luck. The destroyers were getting organized. Star shells were getting closer. Sooner or later, one of those destroyers would spot Tang. "Officer of the deck, how many shells do we have left?" "About 40 rounds, sir." O'Kane did the math. 40 shells, maybe 2 or 3 more ships if they were efficient. Or he could use his last 2 torpedoes on the biggest targets and call it a night. O'Kane looked at the convoy. In the distance, illuminated by fires from burning ships, he saw a massive transport, probably 15,000 tons loaded with troops, and behind it, another large tanker, perfect targets for his last 2 torpedoes. "Cease fire," O'Kane ordered. "Prepare to dive. We're going to finish this properly." Tang dove to periscope depth and maneuvered into position for a final torpedo attack. O'Kane lined up the shot carefully. The troop transport was 1,200 yards away, making 12 knots. "Fire 1." The torpedo left the tube. O'Kane watched through the periscope as it ran straight and true. Hit. The transport shuddered, listed, began to sink. 1 torpedo left. O'Kane swung the periscope to the tanker. But something was wrong. The tanker was turning, maneuvering erratically. The captain had realized there was a submarine nearby and was trying to evade. O'Kane had 1 shot, 1 torpedo. He had to make it count. He calculated the target's speed, course, distance, adjusted the firing solution. "Fire 2!" The last torpedo launched. O'Kane watched it run. 500 yards, 400 yards, 300 yards. Then, disaster. The torpedo started to curve. It was running erratic. The gyroscope had malfunctioned. Instead of running toward the tanker, the torpedo was curving back, toward Tang. O'Kane's blood went cold. "Emergency dive, all ahead flank, right full rudder." The crew scrambled. Tang's bow dipped as ballast tanks flooded, but it was too late. The Mark 18 electric torpedo, one of America's own weapons, slammed into Tang's stern at 46 knots. The explosion was catastrophic. The stern torpedo room was obliterated, 9 men killed instantly. The blast ruptured the pressure hull, water poured in. Tang's stern sank, The bow rose at a steep angle. O'Kane, standing on the bridge, was thrown forward as the deck tilted 40 degrees. "Abandon ship!" someone was screaming. The submarine was sinking, fast. Men scrambled for the hatches. Some made it out, most didn't. Tang's bow pointed skyward for a moment, like a gravestone marking her own death. Then she slid backward into the Pacific. In less than 1 minute, USS Tang was gone, from the surface to 180 feet down. 78 men were still aboard when she went under. Only 9 men made it alive, including Commander Richard O'Kane, who was blown clear by the explosion and found himself floating in the Pacific, watching his submarine disappear. Around him, the Japanese convoy was still burning. 5 ships on fire from Tang's deck gun attack, 2 more sinking from torpedo hits. Tang had sunk or damaged 7 ships in her final battle, but she'd been killed by her own weapon. O'Kane floated in the oil-slicked water, surrounded by debris from the destroyed Japanese ships and his own submarine. Nearby, 8 other Tang crew members were treading water, the only survivors out of 87 men. They'd been in the water for 15 minutes when Japanese destroyer searchlights found them. The destroyer crew pulled the Americans aboard. They were prisoners of war. O'Kane was interrogated. He refused to give more than name, rank, and serial number. The Japanese interrogators didn't believe his story at first. They thought Tang must have been sunk by a Japanese destroyer, not by her own torpedo. But the evidence was clear. Tang's wreck was located. The stern was destroyed, consistent with a torpedo hit from behind. It was a circular running torpedo, a malfunction, one of the known problems with the Mark 18 electric torpedoes. O'Kane and the 8 other survivors spent the rest of the war in brutal Japanese POW camps. They were beaten, starved, forced into hard labor. Of the 9 survivors, 1 died in captivity. O'Kane survived, barely. By the time American forces liberated the camp in August 1945, he weighed 88 pounds. He was sent home, hospitalized, slowly recovered. And in 1946, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions during Tang's final patrol. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty." It mentioned the 24 ships sunk, the aggressive tactics, the surface gun attack. It didn't mention the circular running torpedo. That wasn't O'Kane's fault. That was a weapon malfunction. But O'Kane knew the truth. He'd pushed too hard, stayed too long, attacked one more target when he should have retreated. His aggression, the same trait that made him the Navy's top submarine commander, had killed 78 of his men. It would haunt him for the rest of his life. Richard O'Kane retired from the Navy in 1957 as a rear admiral. He wrote a memoir, Clear the Bridge, about his submarine service. It's considered one of the best submarine warfare books ever written. He died in 1994 at age 83. USS Tang's wreck was discovered in 2005 by a Taiwanese fisherman. She sits in 180 feet of water in the Formosa Strait, the stern blown off, the bow intact. She's a war grave. The 78 men who died aboard her are still there. So what do we make of Richard O'Kane's story? He was the most successful submarine commander in American history. 31 ships sunk, over 225,000 tons of enemy shipping destroyed. He pioneered aggressive tactics that other submarine commanders adopted. He proved that submarines could be offensive weapons, not just defensive scouts. But he also lost his boat, and 78 men, because he pushed too far. Was it worth it? The 7 ships Tang sank on October 24th were carrying troops and supplies to the Philippines. Those ships not reaching their destination meant fewer Japanese soldiers fighting American forces at Leyte. How many American lives were saved because those supplies never arrived? We'll never know, but probably hundreds, maybe thousands. War is brutal mathematics. O'Kane traded 78 American lives to save potentially thousands more. It's the calculus every commander faces, and it's why combat leadership is the hardest job in the world. There is a memorial at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis honoring submarine crews lost in World War II. USS Tang is listed there, along with 51 other American submarines that didn't come home. 3,505 submariners died in WW2, the highest casualty rate of any branch of the U.S. military. But those submarines sank over 1,300 Japanese ships. They strangled Japan's economy, cut off supplies, made victory possible. Tang was part of that. O'Kane was part of that. His aggression won battles. It also killed men. Both things are true. And that's the legacy of USS Tang, a reminder that in war, even the greatest victories come with a terrible cost. Thanks for watching this story from us. If you found Richard O'Kane's story as gripping as we did, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that bell notification so you don't miss our next incredible untold story. We'll see you in the next one.